They're tiny and toony and all a little loony. This is Tiny Toon Adventures, Bab's Big Break on the Nintendo Game Boy. Released in 1992, it was part of a big push of Tiny Toon Adventures games on multiple consoles. Even though 92 saw the final Tiny Toons Adventures season, this was only the third video game of the franchise so far, and more went on to be made well after the beloved cartoon ended, even as recent as 2002. With a franchise as charming and loony as Tiny Toons, did the first Game Boy entry live up to its namesake? After the Konami credit roll, the developers of this game, you get an introduction to the plot. Babs Bunny makes it known to the audience her desire to become a shining star actress. Meanwhile, in the corner, her friends Buster Bunny, Plucky Duck, and Hampton Pig overhear her plans to head to the theater and decide they should follow her to make sure she doesn't get into any trouble. When you begin the game, every stage starts off with Babs giving a heads up of what's to come, and also introducing other characters you need to find in the game to progress forward. For the most part, stages are pretty straightforward, but they do intersperse some puzzles, platforming, and backtracking to keep them fresh and engaging. Throughout the game, you get to play as Buster, Plucky, and Hampton, being able to change out to whichever character you want at the time. But they all share the same health pool, so they're basically all or nothing. There's no mechanical difference on how they control. Where the differences lie, though, are how they use their fruit-themed weapons. Buster lobs carrots in an upward arc, Plucky spikes a pineapple to the ground that then bounces upward, and Hampton bowls watermelons forward. They all have their own pool of fruit inventory, and everyone is able to collect them throughout the stages. The game balances out the need to use all three dudes very well. But it's not like it's required to move forward. If you really wanted, you could play the entire game as one character, although some enemy encounters may prove more difficult than needed along the way. While making your way through stages, there are also secret mini-games you can find to earn fruits or lives in exchange for the gems that you're collecting throughout the stages. One game has you racing against one of three opponents by pressing A and B as fast as you can. There's Bookworm, the slowest racer, who will net you 3 extra fruits if you manage to beat him. Sweetie Bird, the second fastest racer, can give you an extra life. And if you somehow can beat the fastest racer, Little Beeper, you win 3 extra lives. The other minigame is called Montana Mash, which is basically whack-a-mole with a Tiny Toons flair. Every whacked rat earns you points and wins extra lives by scoring over 150 points and beyond. I found the controls to be somewhere between loose and tight, closer to the tight side though. There was a slight glide the characters had when changing direction, kind of like playing on an ice level, but for the whole game. Their jumps were also very floaty, and a decent height that matched well with puzzles and boss fights. Now, what I've said about these controls thus far may have brought the score down in a lot of other games, however here it just worked perfectly fine. It was probably a byproduct of keeping the game more accessible to a younger audience. Would I have liked tighter controls? Sure, but I finished the game without any major complaints, so it all really just worked fine together. The gameplay gets an 8 out of 10. Considering this is the first Tiny Toons game on the Game Boy, and only 3 years into its life cycle, Konami did a bang-up job of translating the cartoon stylings into small pixel graphics. Every character sprite, and I do mean every character, have their unique designs from the show, and some generic enemies still have that Tiny Toons flair to them. Some of the character portraits during dialogue sections look right out of the show, and even have separate animated parts to mimic lip sync and eye expressions. Need I remind you that this was an early life Game Boy game? That's impressive stuff with smart use of pixels. And it also goes to show the strength of good character design from the source material. Backgrounds are okay, but they're not the star of the show here. Most of the elements are flat with basic shading, but it's all very clear and there's no confusion in the elements at all. They do well to avoid any wide open blank spaces by filling them with lightly outlined elements like windows, school lockers, trees, and so on. Something else that this game does really well was its overall presentation. The stage layouts, how characters interact, the events that play out, even idle animations. They all brought the charm and fun of the cartoon into the game, and it all presented very well. Nothing felt forced or out of place, save for maybe a few dialogue bits, but it was all very reminiscent of a Tiny Toons episode. The graphics of Bab's Big Break gets a 9 out of 10. Many of the stages will start out with the classic Tiny Toons Adventure theme song on chiptune loop. Other stage songs work well too and match their environments. Some of them are tracks that are just remixes of classic Warner Brothers owned songs that have been used in classic Looney Tune cartoons of the past. I surprisingly found myself humming along with some of them while playing. I'll also have to mention just how well all the bonus level tracks and cutscene music works too. The whole package is actually quite excellent. I suppose my only gripe would be that the songs do loop pretty often, so they can sound repetitive after a while. But this seems to be mostly countered by the fact that the music changes from location to location pretty often, so you're not stuck listening to the same track for too long. Sound effects all work fine, nothing was out of place or jarring. It's in this category though that you start to hear Konami's influence. Clearly they've reused some sounds from a lot of their other games, and that's because they work really well. The music and sound gets a 10 out of 10. Yet another game I never owned, but played enough to remember. This one gives me nostalgia of a time where I would have a long school bus ride every weekday. A lot of us kids with Game Boys would bring them with us and play on the morning ride in. Sometimes playing verses with the link cable, or showing each other tricks and tips on games we both owned. But oftentimes, there were game swaps where kids would try games that they didn't own. Babs' Big Break was a game that found its way into my Game Boy slot pretty often. It was mainly a socializing time too, so when I did play this game, I barely would make it past the first stage, what with getting distracted talking and all. It still left some good simple nostalgia in me, and now that I've returned to play it again for this review, man, I feel like I missed out on a gem back in the day. The nostalgia hit gets a 7 out of 10. So, while Disney leaned on Capcom to bring their properties to life in video game form, Warner Brothers sought the services of Konami to get the little Toonsters translated to the medium. Konami set out to prove that they were up to the task, and it's in my opinion that they delivered. With excellent translation of the character models to pixel form, a soundtrack that will make you hum along, and presentation that follows the hijinks of its source material, Tiny Toon Adventures Babs' Big Break will make you feel like you're playing an episode of the beloved cartoon.